Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. First, the United Kingdom had announced that they would send depleted uranium rounds to Ukraine and also long range missiles. The depleted uranium rounds wound up being immediately targeted and destroyed before they could be used. The Challenger tanks from the UK have not been seen on the front lines as yet, and I think there's a maximum number of 14. The UK told them, has instructed Ukraine not to use them on the front line. So, and Then the United States promised depleted uranium rounds to Ukraine. By the way, the destruction of the depleted uranium, stock uh, gave rise to an immediate rise in the ambient radiation level in the area, which there was a big debate about, and some people claiming that it was unrelated. Yeah, it was just all coincidence that the ambient radiation level suddenly spiked. Um, sure. So, depleted uranium has been used in Iraq and in Syria, and in those areas, cancer rates have. They've also been used in other areas, but every place that they have been used, you see cancer rates go through the roof. They, birth defects accelerate by exponential numbers. All right, so then we get to cluster munitions. Cluster munitions have been banned by over 120 countries. Countries that have not signed on to the ban are the United States and Russia, Ukraine, and China. But cluster munitions have been used for decades. And one of the biggest problems with cluster munitions is the dud rate. A dud doesn't mean that it will never explode. It means that it does not explode on impact. This can be for many reasons. It can be a flaw in the munition itself, or it may land on a tree or on deep grass that cushions its fall. These can remain in the environment for decades. There are still problems in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, um, country after country that the cluster munitions have been used. Uh, these things remain in the environment, and people are still being injured by them even today. There have been reports that have stated that 40% of the injuries and mortalities from cluster munitions are children. 40%. Now, a lot of these reports refer to these things allegedly looking like toys, because they're shiny and so forth, and children pick them up and play with them. I don't really think that is the issue as much. Uh, you know, I'm pretty sure that children in these areas are taught, if this thing look these things look like this, don't pick it up. So if you're confused about what cluster munitions are come in different sizes. Some are artillery shells, some are rockets. As they fly, the outer shell opens up and they drop numerous bomblets, small bombs, over a wide area. Consider if one of these was launched into your neighborhood, one of these would launch all of these small bombs all over your entire neighborhood. So the dud rate, the United States says that they will only export, you know, cluster munitions that have a dud rate of less than 1%. Well, this is a false number to begin with. First, for a number of reasons. Number one, they've already admitted that the shells that they are sending to Ukraine have a dud rate of over 3%. Then the munitions that they are sending over there are 20, 30 years old. So that increases the dud rate. There's no question about that. So more and more of these get scattered over an area. Then these things get buried in the environment. You're talking about, farmland, you're talking about forest land that these are being launched into. You've got, they get scattered in the forest that, farmers, forestry workers, children, and future generations can wind up happening across within the forest lines, and then in farmland as armored vehicles. They travel over this land and toss, and they throw up dirt which buries these things. Even when soldiers might be right next to one and not see it, they're digging trenches, they throw dirt out of the trench, and again, it gets buried. So in future generations, farmers might be working that land, run over it with their tractor, and this thing explodes. Or they just might be walking through their field, planting, harvesting, what have you, and they step on one that is just under the surface, and they lose their leg, they lose their arm. There are cases where people have lost both arms, been blinded by them, had, brain damage from them, etc., etc. These things are monstrous. There have been reports that said that Russia has been using cluster munitions during this conflict. Russia denies it, and honestly, there has been no evidence that they have done so up to this point. The reports that have come out that said that Russia used them, it made absolutely no sense for that to be happening, because these were areas that were already under Russian control. These were cities in the Donbass, like Mariupol. So there was absolutely no sense in it. I'm not saying that it has not happened, but you ask about, has it happened? Well, how much sense would it make for this to happen? And when you look at, and when you ask how much sense it makes, then it draws questions. Russia states that they have 3.3 million cluster munitions stockpiled, and they don't intend to be using them. we can believe that or not. But there's been no evidence on the front lines of Russia using these, which is where, if they were going to use them, it would make the most sense. Ukraine says that they will only use them where it's no danger to Ukrainians and or to civilians. But they've been bombing civilian population centers since the very beginning with the long range missiles. They have been targeting civilian population centers. They've been bombing Donetsk and the Luhansk areas since 2014, including with cluster munitions, which was reported in Western media, including CNN, the New York Times, Human Rights Watch. They were all talking about Ukraine using cluster munitions against civilian population centers in the Donbass area. So, are we going to believe that they are not going to target population centers at this time? I do not believe it at all. Now, there's also the issue that Ukraine claims that that Crimea and the Donbass regions are, part of Ukraine. So, if they're literally attacking these areas, by their own logic, they are attacking Ukrainians. So, this doesn't make any sense. Any more sense, any more than Russia attacking the Nord Stream pipeline made any sense. There was nothing moving through the pipeline, and if Russia didn't want to send anything through it, all they had to do was turn off the pump. So that made no sense at all. If there's no evidence Russia is using cluster munitions on the front line, then why would we believe that they are using the cluster munitions? Now, in some ways, you can consider, depending on your definition, if you want to loosen the definition, then there are rockets that Russia fires, which, as it flies, it scatters landmines, tank mines. But Ukraine is also using these. The United States uses these. And by the formal definition, these are not cluster munitions. Now, I am against all of them, but we're getting to that. So, cluster munitions, depleted uranium, landmines, which again remain in the environment. If they are not clearly mapped where they are located, then they are very difficult to find. And if you're using a rocket that just scatters them all over the place, that makes it more difficult for them to find later. And people still get harmed, killed every year by landmines that were planted decades ago. Let's go to chemical weapons and include white phosphorus. And let's just go to my policy on all of these. My policy on all of these is that none of these things should exist in the U.S. arsenal. These things should not be produced or stockpiled. Every bit of them should be destroyed. White phosphorus. If you have never seen white phosphorus, I personally have seen white phosphorus burn through 8 inches of hardened armor, steel. One white phosphorus grenade. Imagine what that does to a human body. But these aren't normally used in singular grenades. You see helicopters flying and launching these things from both sides by the hundreds. Children and civilians get injured by these things. White phosphorus cannot be extinguished. It doesn't matter. You put water on it, you put chemicals on it, it keeps on burning until it depletes itself. It burns through the human body to the bone and can just keep going. This is horrendous. It should not exist as a weapon. Any form of chemical weapons, cluster munitions, depleted uranium, none of these things should exist in the U.S. arsenal. It doesn't matter if another country is using them or not. If another country tortures POWs, should we also torture POWs? Of course, we do. Just think about, Cuba. We have people in Cuba that we have been incarcerating and torturing for over 20 years now. So, yeah, we do torture people, and that needs to stop as well. One of the last things I want to mention about this is cluster munitions. Joe Biden and his administration have already admitted that the reason that these are being sent to Ukraine is that we are out of standard artillery munitions to send them. Think about the implications of that. Now, Clay, in spite of what some spokespeople for this administration claim, cluster munitions are useless against armored vehicles. The bomblets are too small to breach the armor. They will destroy a human body, but they are too weak to destroy armor and breach armor. So these are not replacements for the artillery that has been sent. What they have stated is that these are a replacement until we can increase our production of standard artillery shells. Well, that is going to take years to do. The announcement made is that between the U.S. and Europe, they intend to have a capacity of producing 2 million artillery shells per year by 2025. Russia is already producing, allegedly, 2.5 million artillery shells per year. So by 2025, and they are expanding their production, by 2025, they'll be producing probably 4 million, which is twice as much as the U.S. and the EU combined will be producing at that time. How sustainable is any of this? How logical is any of this? I'm against all forms of warfare. If you can't sit down and have peace talks, then no. If two countries cannot sit down and have peace talks in good faith, then the United States should not be arming either side at all. And in this case, in this particular case, Ukraine actually negotiated a peace plan last March, which was supposed to be formalized in April of last year in 2022, but they backed out of it. So that was not negotiating in good faith. Anyway, none of these things under my administration would be produced or stored. They would all be destroyed. They would never be used under my administration. So, share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.